Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Ben, I am in beautiful, sunny San Diego, hanging out here. So if anyone is confused about like what my background is, I'm just in some random Airbnb. I'm also like 2 blocks from Balboa Park, where Foot Locker Nationals or now Champs Sports Nationals are now held. So yeah, it's hillier than you'd expect San Diego to be. But hopefully that you're having a just as entertaining week and as I am.
Absolutely. Are you going to go for a run over there? Are you going to walk the course, check it out?
Uh, I am going to run to the coffee shop. I think that's like the most running that I've been doing. We sat out on like under some trees and waited to get into our Airbnb. Um, but no, I don't run anymore. I'm the biggest hypocrite there is. So yeah, that's just me.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. We all come to that point eventually in our lives. So we are up to 110 ratings on Spotify. We're up to there on Apple. I think we're staying steady on the ratings, but we did get two new reviews. One that says "Love the podcast, keep up the great analysis," and then a second one which I think was from a little while back that we just missed, but said "Fun crew with good coverage and analysis, particularly the collegiate distance running scene. I'm especially enjoying the D3 coverage." So love those. Appreciate it. Don't know why our numbers aren't going up. If that someone's like not like taking down their review as other people are rating, I'm not sure what's happening.
I think what it is that if they put in the 5 stars, that counts as a rating. But if they write one, it doesn't count. So I don't think a written
Right.
one. They might be different. But will we take it? Absolutely. It still helps the algorithm. Still helps us. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Also, it helps our egos a little bit, right? We're in front of a camera, in
Yeah.
front of a mics for a reason. So, but no, I know. In all seriousness, appreciate it. Do want to quickly start before we get going on anything. Just want to
Yep.
let everyone know we've made an announcement on the site, Streamline Athletes and the Stride Report. We've parted ways. We really just want to appreciate and thank Streamline Athletes for all of their work for the past year and a half. Without them, there is this isn't revived. We're not doing this anymore. Point blank. Period. There's no other like, well, this could have happened. No, without Streamline Athletes, this wouldn't have happened. They're the best recruiting platform in track and field. It legitimately is unmatched. That platform is incredible. It was a mutual parting of ways, very amicable. We're wishing them the best of luck. We have no intent to change anything that we're doing here with the site. We're going to continue to grow. Everything's going to stay in largely the same. And I think people are going to continue to really like what we're about to push out later in the year. So just want to make that note. But other than that, Ben, what did you want to start with today?
Let's start with Caitlin Tuohy, and and maybe what she's not, the group that she's not a part of, which is the Bowerman Finalist. Caitlin Tuohy, who broke, I make sure that I have this right, 4 collegiate records this year.
Three, technically four, if you include the en route 1500 indoors, I believe.
Right. Okay. So yeah, 3.5. Um, did not get included, largely in part, we think, to her outdoor NCAA performances. Do you think? I mean, you could say the same thing about Britton Wilson about having great years before the outdoor championships. Do you think that was kind of the nail in the coffin? Do you think she's a finalist and possibly even the winner if she wins at least one title this outdoor season?
Um, yes, I think she's definitely a finalist. It's so hard because, like, I think it's very easy as a distance site. We've built a distance community here where, of course, we're like, "Oh, Caitlin Tui has to be in there." If you look at the resumes, though, and I can't believe I'm saying this, if you look at Britton Wilson, if you look at Julian Alfred, if you look at Jasmine Moore, it's like, okay, wait, so they all have multiple NCAA records and they all have national titles and they all did much better on the national stage outdoors than Tui did. I I I get it. I get it. Do I agree with it? I think it's harder to break 3 different distance records in over what,
Yep.
2 seasons? I just do. I think it's harder to do that, especially by the magnitude that she did it with. Um, I don't know if I agree, but I don't know if I disagree with her being omitted either. I'm stuck in a very, very weird middle ground, a gray area. And it, again, I just want to know what the criteria is. I've been saying this for 3 years. I've written articles about this. What is the criteria? And yet no one seems to be telling me. It's like, well, it seems to be more about times. Really? Well, if it's about times, then like, is Tuohy that much less? Well, if it's about titles, it's like, well, then why didn't Cheserek win it? Like, Cheserek's the most
Yeah.
winning distance runner ever. Like, there's no balance. There's no like, match to it, and that's what really is the most frustrating part out of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, she really would have had a perfect case if she would have had the double at the outdoor championships. And there does seem to be a little bit of recency bias where it's like we saw the last performance we saw from her was her by far worst performance all year, and you can't help but wonder if they had voted if like she had her indoor kind of performances this May or this June, if maybe she has a little bit more possibility of being one of those finalists. I really think that the lasting image is kind of hurting her. It's just unfortunate. I agree with you. I think she's has a case, but it's not an overwhelmingly strong one where you're like, man, she really got like they really dropped the ball by leaving her off. There's a perfectly good argument for leaving her off compared to those three.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy again for us to be as biased as we are towards distance runners in favor of distance runners. But this was a ridiculously stacked year for the Bowermen. I mean, all of those women who made it were well deserving. There's been
Yep.
years where there's been finalists as like, nah, they threw them in there because they kind of had to. Um, but this year it felt like there were 4 women, 2 included, who could legitimately win it. Hard decisions had to be made. Um, I don't disagree with this more than I did with Cheserek not winning. I'll say that much.
Yeah. That one we could have probably our own standalone podcast on. So
Yeah,
we'll keep
exactly.
moving. Let's go on to we had some announcements from athletes turning pro. So let's start with Charles Hicks, who is turning pro with Nike and joining the Nike Bowerman Track Club. This comes as a bit of a surprise as Hicks had at least he had one more year of
I
eligibility.
believe one more. Yeah.
um he would have been obviously the favorite in cross country this coming fall to defend his title. He probably would have been one of the favorites to win the 5K and 10K indoors and then outdoors. He's coming off a second place finish this outdoor season in the 10K. But at the same time, you also wonder if you're Hicks, if you're striking while the iron's hot. I mean, he obviously could go on to win more championships, but he's in a great position now. He had an NIL deal with Nike already, and it just seemed like he was ready to make that move. The more interesting part about this for us, obviously, is what it does to Stanford's chances this coming fall.
Yeah. I thought he would stay. I thought there was a chance he'd go pro, but I thought he'd stay. I get it. Like Worlds coming up,
Yep,
Olympics, I believe the following year, if I'm right. I believe Olympics,
correct.
yeah, Paris.
2024.
Um, but I get it. I get it. The thing though that I was like, man, Stanford has a real shot to win the team national title
Yep.
because, like, yes, they lose Devin Harden, they lose Micah Boone and Rousseau, but they get back Thomas Boyden and Sprout, who's hopefully going to be healthy this time, and Robinson. You add in Hicks and you pair him with the young brothers, right? And Robert DiDonato improves, and there's a few other guys in the mix, right? Evan Burke maybe. I was like, man, we wouldn't wait until the winter like that. That's what surprised me a little bit. Do you still believe with Hicks gone, but the young brothers and all those people moving in and out that I mentioned, do you still see Stanford realistically being able to win a national title this fall?
I still think they could, in the very much sense of like a best case scenario where everybody stays
Right.
healthy and like runs not even to their 100%, which I think is what makes it a realistic chance. If they're all like 90, 95%, then I think they have a good shot. Obviously, that it depends on what other teams are doing. What does NAU look like by November? What does some of these other challengers look like? But I still think they have the guys. Their margin for error is way lower now. So one of the most dependable cross country performers of the last year or two is Hicks, and to lose him for a team that's not been very dependable is a big blow. So I mean, they have the talent. I'm not going to pick them to win the title by any means, but I think I'm trying to go through my head of who's behind NAU. It's probably BYU, and then it's Stanford, I think, right? And so I
I
mean,
think Oklahoma State. I think because
yeah,
if they bring back Masaudi, Mayer, Shisama,
Shoppy if he's gonna run
I think
cross. Yeah.
Shoppy is back, and then there's like one other guy who Rory Leonard. Like I think Oklahoma State's definitely in that
And they're
mix.
bringing in some strong guys too.
They are.
So yeah, I agree. So I mean, I still think they're probably Stanford's still a top 3, top 4 kind of school. And as we've seen in years past, like NAU specifically last year, if you're in that top 4 kind of position and you have experienced guys, you have a shot. And they have the front runners to be able to kind of put themselves in position. But it's a big blow. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that.
Yeah. No, I know a lot of it's going to depend on are Lex and Leo Young both going to be as good as we think they can be.
Yeah,
If they're
and it's
top
hard.
15 names, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard. Like freshmen, true freshmen are not always as good as I think we sometimes believe them to be. It's really rare like to run that well on the national stage. This is not to say that they can't run well. This is not to say that they can't be all Americans, but you need both of them to run well, and you need both of them to run like top 25 well.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask. So we will see what happens, but something to keep in mind. Watch out for Robert DiDonato, Thomas Borden, Evan Burke, and a few others. Those guys will also be crucial.
I'm gonna remind you of this when we're doing our individual rankings and being like, "Do we remember what happened with Colin Solomon last year?
Calm down.
Let's
Move
pump the
on. Move
brakes."
on. Calm down. Get out of here, dude. Get out of here. The difference is that Colin Solomon never ran, 13:34 for 5,000 meters. So a
That's
little
true.
different.
That's true. That's true. All right, let's go on to the next pro announcement. Crayton Carrozza, looking to turn pro as well. The Texas 800-meter superstar making the move. How surprising was this move for you?
A little surprised. I thought like his stock as a pro might be better if you were to wait a
Yeah.
year. I'm not reporting anything, but I have reason to believe that Will Sumner might be going pro. I'm not reporting that. I don't have anything firm on that yet, but I have one or two hints
Rumor.
that
There's a
maybe
rumor mill going
there's
right
a
there.
rumor.
Yeah.
We have a little something that suggests like maybe that's the case. I don't know that for sure yet, but if he does leave, um, then I don't know. It's Busy Mana who's left, and you got Usama El Bachebe, but like that Titan roadblock is one less for now. Carrozza, and
Yeah.
he might have actually been ill at the outdoor national meet. Um, Actually, does he even have? No, he has eligibility. That's right.
Yeah.
He has eligibility on the track, I believe. So I was a little surprised, but like I get it. It makes sense. Like he could go now, but I was surprised. I thought he would wait a year.
Yeah, I mean, if he has a good offer, it's hard to turn down. But I agree. I thought he should have stayed, especially. I mean, again, we have no knowledge of this, but just putting the puzzle pieces together of what Sumner just did at NCAA's. We have a World Championships coming up. Like he's going to be a top contender. We've seen what has happened in terms of past top freshmen running and winning NCAA's like Donovan Brazier, what they tend to do after that. So you can kind of connect the dots a little bit and think that at least it's a possibility at the very least. And yeah, so I think if Crowza would have come back, it would have been him, Bizimana, and Bushabi. And like, there's a great chance that he could have won one of those two 800-meter titles between indoor and outdoor. And I feel like that bumps his stock even higher. So a little bit of a surprise there. And like you said, thins out the herd a little bit on the 800 side. But as we've seen over and over again, that 800-meter group refreshes and replenishes itself. I'm sure there's going to be one or two names that make a huge jump going into the 2023, 2024 year. And all of a sudden, we're talking about them as a title contender as well.
Real quick note on Sumner. Mara did send us a link, the USTF CCCA link. It's a job opening for the head cross country coach position at Georgia, which is currently occupied by, I believe, Pat Henner. Um, and if he's gone, that's an interesting development. A little unexpected. Just going to throw that out there. Anyways, what are we going to move on to next? East Tennessee State cuts a little suddenly. Men's indoor
Yep.
track. This is one of the better distance programs in the Southern Conference. Admittedly, Furman dominates that conference, but they've got some guys here and there. They had a 148 guy this past year. Evan Guzman is a pretty decent guy on the grass. Nothing crazy, but pretty solid. They cut indoor track. I'm a little surprised that we're still cutting programs in the post-COVID era. Yeah, a lot of it, from what the press release states, is due to Title IX and a decrease in male enrollment, I believe, in comparison to women. So it's a little more Title IX. They say financial and human resources things. Seems like it was a little bit of everything based on that. I sometimes question some of these releases, but we only can go with what we have.
They have an indoor track there that they can use, and that's the
Oh
frustrating
my gosh,
part.
do they really?
Yes, like, I mean, it's not a good one. Like, it's like I raced at it when
But
we
they
had
still
Tennessee
have it.
like high school state championships. It was a horrible track, but they have one, and like that's what makes it all the more frustrating. Like that you have it, you have the athletes. Like if you're trying to, I like understand the Title IX argument to a certain extent, but like if you're trying to cut money or anything, don't cut the sport where you already have the athletes and you're not actually going to save any money probably from this move. So it just is, and you already have the facilities, like you have the athletes, you have the coaches. It's just it's puzzling. Like I also don't know, like I don't know how Title IX works 100% in this regard, but like you're not like losing any student athletes by making this move. It's just like you're cutting the number of sports, I guess, that you're competing
You technically are, because it's counted as
in.
indoor track is
Okay.
counted as a separate sport. So like they, by a strict numbers perspective, they're counted as separate athletes. I believe that's how it works. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, but I'm pretty
That
sure that's
sounds
the
right.
case. Yeah. Yeah, we just make stuff up here at TSR. But no, I agree. I thought it was odd, a little surprising. Mid majors, there's always this kind of, if your school has enrollment issues, this this happens more often than
Yep.
not. Not more often than not, but it's not unusual or entirely shocking. So we'll be interested to see what happens there. But let's move on to, I think, the biggest piece of news. Do we want? Yeah, well, no. We got one more piece of news. I didn't want to get too ahead of myself, but New Mexico hires Darren Gauson to do be their next head coach. He is coming from Bradley, where he developed their men's cross country team to their first ever national meet appearance in cross country in 2018. He's developed Wilma Nielsen, who ran 202 and 238 over 800 meters and 1K, and Tiana Lastroca from this past spring, who ran 410 for 1500 meters. Nielsen was an All American. Lastroca qualified for the outdoor national meet. Thoughts on the hiring?
I thought it was perfect. This is the exact kind of hire that I thought made sense. Picking someone from who is already the head coach at a maybe smaller mid-major program and elevating him to a program where he's going to have a little bit more resources. Obviously, has a lot more prestige and legacy behind it, at least on the women's side. And so I thought it made a lot of sense. Really great hire for them. He's turned into Bradley into, even if they're not a consistent like national qualifying team, to a consistently solid program in the Missouri Valley Conference, which is sneaky competitive, and he has shown the ability to develop top end athletes. So I think giving him a little bit more resources, maybe some better athletes, I think he's going to not make New Mexico necessarily what Franklin had them, but they're going to be still a very solid, good program that I think should be competitive to make nationals almost every year going forward, which I think is about as good as New Mexico could have hoped for.
I agree. I think it's a really smart, solid hire. Can take a, like you said, probably like not even a higher tier mid major, just in terms of like traditional athletic
Hmm.
size, not just cross country or track. I mean, but just in terms of like, a traditional established mid major, like New Mexico is, in comparison to Bradley. Um, even New Mexico has some athletic funding issues in the past, but ultimately what I'm saying is that like this is a good hire. He knows how to operate this kind of like this level, but New Mexico's already at a high level of competitiveness, which Gauson has proven he can get them to. He's developed a handful of competitive individuals, and not only that, but like he can recruit internationally. And I believe
Yep.
Mara or Brett in our Slack made that point of like, hey, like for a program like New Mexico that has recruited heavily internationally, this is a pretty, synchronous fit. I think, it's yeah, I know you're thinking if that's a word or not. I think it is. We're going to just kind of go with it. But I like the hiring. I thought it was really smart. It's not the first one I would have thought of, but in retrospect, as we step back when we were talking about who's the kind of person that like we think this matches for, this is exactly like what I envisioned, but didn't really know how to put words behind.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, they brought in a lot of British athletes. I mean, my British teammates at Belmont, we knew them fairly well, especially that 2018 team that had like Mike Ward and Heron Dunderdale, who really good
At
on the
Bradley.
grass. At Bradley, yeah, at
Yeah.
and Dunderdale was a good steeple chaser. So I think he's going to continue to pull from that pipeline, and I think that'll be very very successful for a New Mexico program that has Josh Kerr as one of its alumnus.
Hmm.
And like again, you can pull from at least the Great Britain side of things, and then expand from there as well, which I think will give him a nice leg up and make the transition a little bit smoother for him.
Agreed. Agreed. So good hire. But speaking of international athletes, Amelia Mazza-Downie and Elise Thorner, two former New Mexico athletes, went to the transfer portal once Joe Franklin left. It was a Mazza-Downie who went to Florida. Now it's Thorner. All within earlier this week. We're recording this Sunday. Um, I mean, thoughts, reaction. I mean, just this was wild, right? I mean, it completely changes everything.
Oh yeah, and I mean we had mentioned Mazza-Downie to Florida as a strong possibility last week. It still felt like, man, is that really who's going to end up with someone who I consider as one of the best overall athletes to hit the transfer portal? And it just that seems like a big leap, but they do end up landing her, and then the Thorner edition in my mind is almost as impactful because
Yep.
it gives them so much more margin for error. It gives them a great top four and really starts putting them firmly in that podium contender status. And that is, I mean, Mazza-Downie would have, I think, inched them towards it, but her alone she wasn't going to be the person to push them over that edge. And Thorner is, they have four strong. You can kind of bank on them finding a fifth and developing a fifth that's just good enough. And we're not talking about a Colorado type of team, with the exception of maybe Volby, who struggles a lot with injuries and is inconsistent. Like the rest of this like top four is pretty solid, pretty consistent. Mazza-Downie, Thorner, Asicol, like we can expect them to show up and run well at the NCAA level, which makes like the fact that they have four top tier women, I think. Whereas like Colorado, they have more than that, but you have a lot more question marks. So I think this elevates them so high, and I'm really, really excited to see what we're going to see from the Gators this year.
I don't think I've been doing this now for I think 8 years in total, writing six with DSR, maybe even 6.5 almost. I've never seen a program go from being I don't even think you're going to make the national meet to you could win the national title. That's insane. I was confident that Will Palmer was the right move for Florida. Um, I knew he would bring in a name or two. I didn't think those named or twos would be as impressive as Asicol or Mazza-Downie or Thorner, and I didn't think he'd get three of them. I
No,
mean,
I
that
didn't think you had
is
the money to get three of them.
I didn't. I neither did I. So they get Asicol. I was like, well, I wonder how much money here, because Florida historically, you know, they don't really bring in that many. At least not under Solinsky, they didn't.
No.
And you kind of just like you also think back and you're like, Do you know how many things had to go perfectly for this Florida team to now be in this position? Right? Like Volby, who actually just signed an NIL deal with Nike, looks like she's
Mhm.
at least going to be sticking around. Not going to be probably based on this NIL deal, probably not going to go pro. That's
Yep.
step one. Step two, Palmer leaves Alabama for Florida. If he doesn't leave Alabama for Florida, well, the Asacol's probably not, or at least far less likely to
Yep.
go from Alabama to Florida. And if Joe Franklin doesn't go from New Mexico to Louisville, then Thorner and Mazza-Downie aren't even probably not available. Like that's it. There's three major moves that happen that now suddenly we're talking about Florida potentially winning a national title.
Do we think they have room for one more? Do we
I
think
don't
with
know.
I
I I, I think with SEC money, with Florida money,
yeah.
and an NIL deal and a grad transfer out there, who maybe needs like to be like a 1-year rental. If you have NIL money, I know certain schools. I know schools are. I know
Yeah.
schools are using. They're trying to leverage that. Um, I'm not gonna put it out of reach. And like that's the difference with NIL money. Like, hey, if you come here, we'll give you NIL money. Like for at least like a 1-year graduate transfer, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so I don't know. I I think it's doable, but I also would just be surprised. Like, I mean, Asacol with Volby, with Mazza-Downie, with Thorner is already a lot. They already brought in Allison Wilson. I guess like my thought process is like I'm concerned about Volby's health and consistency. I'm
Yeah.
concerned about who that fifth runner is going to be. What if not everyone runs well on the same day? You have to run well on the same day. I'd even say Thorner needs to be like this much better, like just this much better on the grass if they really want to contend for a national title. Um, so we'll see. There's still some questions, but what a, what an evolution for
I
one
mean,
team to go under.
you're talking about three. They have at least three women who are top 50. I think probably going to be top 15 names this year.
Probably.
Which, I mean, that sets you up pretty well. And Thorner should be an All American. And then you're just figuring out that fifth spot. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on Volby. Like there was no scenario, even if they get two more runners, where they aren't dependent on Volby being healthy and running. Like maybe not 100%, but like at least 90%, where she's putting herself firmly in that top 10. And so, I mean, that's going to be an X factor that they're not going to be able to get away from, but they only need to fill one more scoring spot. And I just have a lot of confidence that even if it's not going to be a perfect fit, I think they're going to be able to develop or get somebody else to be a top 80 kind of name. And I don't know if that wins them a title, but I think that puts them in conversations at least.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I think a lot of it's going to be like, who's that fifth? And are you all running well on the same day? We'll assume Volby's going to be just good enough.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, after the 5K stuff that she showed, she's probably the national title favorite. It depends. It depends on what you view her health as. We'll see. We'll see. But this was a heck of a move. Will Palmer. I mean, if they get on the podium, I don't see how he's not coach of the year in November for us, at least for
Yeah.
TSR. What he did to recruit these athletes is special. I don't remember anyone going from not in the qualifying conversation to national title conversation, much less in the span of 2 weeks. So
We talked a lot about last summer of all these new coaches like Schumacher, kind of coming in and being like, oh, they're gonna really hit the portal and really pull in people, like a little bit like what we saw Carlson do on the men's side. And we kind of didn't say those same things about Palmer when he got hired, and yet he has proven to be arguably the most proficient coach out of them all at recruiting these transfer portal athletes, which, I mean, all credit to
I think
him.
Colorado might argue
Yeah,
that.
Colorado is probably up there too, but I guess meaning like brand new coaches moving into new
Right.
roles. But yeah, pretty wild, just his ability to do that, and I think really changes our calculus on how we see Florida, obviously this coming year, but also just the years moving forward too. I think they really nailed that hire with Palmer. We knew he was a good coach. And obviously he played a big part in getting a lot of great athletes to come to Alabama. But I don't think, at least I'll speak for myself, I didn't see him as this elite of a recruiter on the transfer stage, and that's going to be a huge asset for them moving forward.
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, kudos to him. Um, well done. Speaking of athletes that he could potentially go after on the transfer portal, Olivia Howell, a 1 year rental between cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. The mile indoor national champion who ran 4:34 at altitude at Albuquerque, which is like what a 4:30 conversion or something like that, maybe even
Yeah.
4:29, something along those lines. She upset Lauren Gregory. She's run 4:33 regularly, non-converted. She's run 4:09 over 1,500 meters, 2:02. She's at one point was like in our cross country top 50 rankings individually on the
Hmm.
women's side last fall. Was the Midwest regional champion. Has had some up and down days on bigger stages like nationals and like the Big Ten meet, but in the fall of 2021, she finished, I believe, 139th, 130th, something. Um, so a huge asset, great 3 season threat. Doesn't need to be a superstar, and for the right team, could really complete their lineup. And maybe that lineup's the Gators.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that's where
I'd
she
be
ended
surprised.
up.
I'd be surprised
But
too. Yeah.
I mean, another, like, again, we are seeing just the transfer portal come up with bigger and bigger names every year. I mean, we talked about it with Mazza-Downie and Olivia Howell. I mean, obviously the mile indoor champ, and obviously she didn't have necessarily the day she wanted to at outdoor championships where she finished eighth. But I was so impressed, and I think this speaks to her confidence, not only her confidence, but also her fitness, that she ran step for step with Tuohy as Tuohy kind of pushed out and went real hard early in that race. She was the only one who really went with her. And that's not the Olivia Howell we've seen in years past, even this past indoor season when she won that title. That's not really how she runs these races. She's more of a kind of like sit back a little bit and then finish strong and pick off people near the end. For her to kind of have that confidence and self belief, I think that bodes really well for her next year. And she's obviously proven with her indoor mile championship that she can run it in a quick time. She has that 4:09 PR. I think we might see like a dominant runner like emerge from in that 1,500 mile like arena in Howell over the next year.
I think the underrated aspect of what she brings to the table is her tactics. I think she's tactically really
Hmm.
underrated, sometimes more than others. I mean, sometimes she's a little bit better in certain situations, but I just think she like if you really want to get a score and like really want to, have a marquee season with someone who can like really fill in a certain gap somewhere, like I'm trying to think of a team that would kind of like be the right fit for her. Like to me, Arkansas would be a really nice spot for her. Veteran leadership, growing team. They value 3 season athletes like her. It would be a little ironic to get Hal after she beat Lauren Gregory for the
Yeah.
mile national title. But I think there'd be great fit, great value there. Um, if she wants to stay in the Midwest, I feel like Notre Dame would be like an excellent spot for someone like her. Do you have any thoughts as to like where that might be a good fit for her?
I saw, I think in our group chat, maybe someone mentioned Virginia, and I like
Yeah,
that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think the Arkansas, that kind of mold of a team that's looking to win maybe a indoor outdoor track title. I think she makes a lot of sense of just a plug in play. Like she's going to score you a good amount of points more than likely. And if you have a decent cross country team, she's also going to be able to help you there. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, we'll talk about Arkansas in a second on the men's side, but I think they need kind of someone to come in and be a little bit of a leader of that program and give them a little jolt of talent and scoring punch. And I think she could be that person as they kind of refresh this roster even more.
yeah, she's just valuable, right? And there's only so much value you can get out of a 1 year graduate
Yeah.
transfer, but she's pretty much as high as you can get just across the board, well-rounded, great, really solid range, not amazing range, but solid range. And I just think it's to have someone at that level who I still think has a lot of untapped potential on the cross country course. Um, I wonder if we can fit her into our rankings this summer. I'd be interested to see if we can do that.
Yeah, I
It'll be
mean, she
tight.
had such a rough out or cross country national race, but the rest of her, I mean, Big Tens wasn't great either, but she has shown flashes of being one of the top 50 names, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, at one point she was listed in our top 50.
Yeah.
I think especially because when you win that Midwest title, regionals again,
Yeah.
so tricky sometimes. It's hard to get a gauge, um, but yeah, no, I'll be
You can't
interested to
be a
see what
bad cross
happens.
country you can't be a bad cross country runner and win a regional championship. Like you have like not
Well,
everybody's going all out, but
no, but you can win a Midwest title. You can win, a regional title. Maybe like we can win. There's certain regions where if you win the title, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a top 50 name.
no, that's no, and I think that's fair. Let's transition. So Kirami Yego, someone that we had talked about last week being on the transfer portal, is headed to Arkansas. He has 2 seasons of cross country left. I believe at least one indoor and then one outdoor remaining. Going to Arkansas, pretty much exactly what we expected. He owns PRs of 13:34 in the 5K and 28:22 in the 10K. Just makes the world of sense with the Razorbacks. This is kind of who we both predicted he would end up with. He provides a ton of value on the grass. And then what he did this past outdoor season shows that he should be a scorer in at least the 10K as well.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at where Arkansas was at the national meet last year, 23rd, I believe, overall. They lose two back end guys, but they return pretty much everyone else. You add in Yego in there, and you kind of start doing the math about like where that puts them. And it's pretty much what we said. Like it's top 20 slash like flirting with the top 15. That's where the ceiling kind of caps right now. But I'll be interested to see what happens. Like, does Arkansas start going after a few other names? Because that's what they have the
They
history of doing.
they
Yeah,
certainly will
and
try.
they and they will certainly try. We've seen them do it in the past. We've seen them bring in an odd slot of names before, both men's and women's sides. Um, but Yego's perfect. Like he feels a little bit like a clone of Kiprop, and they're going to be an awesome 1-2 punch. In fact, if Dylan Jacobs goes pro, then they might be the best 1-2 punch in the SEC, depending on how you feel about Victor Kiprop of Alabama and Ilya Kipsang or Hilary Chariot or whatever the case may be. Um, so yeah, I mean that'll be interesting. And then it's a matter of like, okay, so Tennessee does lose them, then like who, how does the rest of their lineup look? And compared to Alabama, can they all run on the same day like they did last year at SECs? And then it's like, well, if Arkansas develops their back group, it gets interesting because I think we forget, and Ole Miss as well. They're slowly beginning to enter the conversation, especially by picking up Cruz Gomez, in addition to Toby Gillen and Jack Meiser. Um, I think we forget how close that NCC cross country race was last fall, where they were all within like 3 or 4 points.
That was one of the more stunning races all year,
Yeah,
where we thought that was kind of going to be, what was that, Alabama or Tennessee. And then all of a sudden we have like 4 teams duking it out all of a sudden, where we just thought Ole Miss and Arkansas would be way back. And it was just frankly, one of the more entertaining races we saw all season. I would be surprised if we see something like that again. But I mean, teams are kind of loading back up and kind of moving toward a steady equilibrium between all four. So maybe we will.
yeah, and it'll be interesting. It'll be really fun to kind of throw that in there. So I'm excited. Real quick though, I know we actually don't have anything more on our rundown, but I am going to throw
Mhm.
an audible. I want to throw one last one out there. This happened a while ago, but we never really talked about it, and I feel like it matters. And it's Isaiah Steury. Isaiah Steury, the former freshman standout from Notre Dame,
Yep.
going to Oregon. This just transfer happened a couple months ago, actually. But I do think it's big enough to the point where we got to talk about it. Um, A, are you surprised? B, how good will he be and how good will Oregon be this year, which is a wildly challenging question, considering that Oregon loses Bienenfeld and a few other names, but returns a bunch of
Yeah.
young guys, and how do they develop and the recruits and blah, 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 blah. And then where do you see, like, what does this mean for the Oregon Ducks long term?
I mean, it's a huge move for them long term because he brings, I think, basically a full 4 years on the track and 3 years on the grass. So he's almost as good of a new recruit, but someone who has proven ability on the NCAA stage, at least on the grass. I mean, him finishing 63rd this past fall. I mean, he had a great consistent season. I mean, for a freshman
Yep.
to finish 14th at Joe Piani, 28th at Netico, 9th at ACCs. Like, that is a excellent resume. And then to cap it off with that 63rd place finish at NCAAs is about as good as you can expect from a true freshman. Obviously, we've seen some come in and be in that top 30, top 40, but that's an excellent season. And he is huge for an Oregon program, like you said, that is looking to kind of get the ball rolling downhill again, rather than kind of just be pushing it uphill and just trying to hang on and stick kind of to that same area that they've been. Now they can start to pick up some momentum. They can bring in Reinhard Harrison from last year, who didn't run at all this past year, and I think hopefully will be part of their plans in a big way moving forward. I'm excited to see what they could do. I think they're going to need to pick up some more names and develop well. But when you have the coaching staff like they do, you have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, this is a team of the future, especially with Steury. Steury is also, like, I think the aspect that maybe gets overlooked here is that he might be so young, but he's wildly reliable. I mean, on a Notre Dame team that was, I mean, frankly, they were not reliable. They were not consistent throughout last year. They had really high peaks and really tough lows, but Steury was like the one guy who gave them any, like, reliability outside of, like, Carter Solomon, right? I mean, even Carter Solomon was, you know, he was good at Joe Piani, but I have to go back and double check where exactly he was. He was 13th, one spot ahead of Steury, but I mean that race wasn't, an accurate comparison to what the rest of his
Indicative.
season was like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I love this move for Oregon. I hope they threw the entire, fund at them, whatever they have over there.
Kit and
All
caboodle.
discussion. Yeah, I hope they threw it because he's just that good. In terms of value, I think he's wildly underrated, and the lack of track this past year was not great. I don't know what happened there. Probably
Yeah.
just, you know developing and growing as a true freshman, but that's a huge, huge win. And if Oregon's on the podium in 2-3 years time, I think it's probably going to be because of Steury.
Yep, yep, he'll be a big part, and I mean, again, he's that pillar that you can kind of grow the rest of the team from. Like, maybe
Yep.
he's not their true low stick, but he's that consistent performer who is going to be around for the next 3 years that you can build a team around, and that's invaluable, especially for a team trying to build for the future like Oregon. Huge loss for Notre Dame,
Yeah.
but a big, big gain for the Oregon Ducks. So yeah, that's a good point. I'm gonna have to, when we're doing our rankings and our individual rankings, I think he's gonna play a big part in how we decide certain spots. So
Yeah, yeah, that'll be a fun one to try to figure out. I'm not sure
yeah,
about him, but he'll be in there somewhere. I'm just not sure where.
yeah,
But that'll be fun. So, cool. I'm gonna wrap it there. If you like this podcast, go leave a 5-star rating, review, and written review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Go subscribe there. We're gonna start posting a few things later this year. So go subscribe, smash that like button. Right? Is that what they say? They say smash the like button. Um,
sure,
and yeah, sure, why not? And then on the site, so much stuff is on the site, like so much stuff. We've got transfer news galore, regular news galore, as we already went over today. Some of that. We've got discussion articles. We're gonna have some rankings later this month in July. I think late July. You can expect some of that to come out, and just loads and loads of content. A lot of great transfer stuff. Go check out the transfers page as well. Then go follow us on Instagram and on Twitter, even though you might not be able to see our tweets anymore on Twitter. So uh, it's not because of us, it's because of Elon Musk. But anyways, regardless, that's all I've got. That's all I got. Ben.
all right. Well, until next week, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.